You don't remember this miracle, but it happened to you. You were born into chaos. Those first days were a blur. But then, by the power of your mind, you resolved that chaos into a universe. A small universe at first, but a supreme act of learning. From then on, you became a learning machine, acquiring knowledge at a rate that you would never match again.
Take a look at the Bank of America ATMs. They've basically just melted, when we assume with all the money inside, but they're gone. And then we walk towards the main branch doors here, again on the 15,300 block of Sunset Boulevard, and look inside. Everything is gone. And one of the questions I had for my photographer, asked him if he knew, what happens to the safe? I mean, we're always told to put our valuables, our treasures, in the safe. What happens when a bank burns to the ground? Does the safe remain standing, or is the heat simply too intense and everything inside is destroyed?
What it reminded me of more of a war scene where you had certain targets that were bombarded, where artillery was just blew them up. With no rhyme or reason. In other words, you'd have this fire going crazy and burning everything down and 3 houses being fine. Nothing's happening. Or neighborhoods that were still green. They're still green. And next to a place that, for example, you know, we're just looking at a Secret Service house that was out there. You know, all the vehicles are melted. Yet the house next door still has green shrubbery on it. And, you know, the house is fine. There's only, I think, 4 or 5 houses in that 200, you know, it's in the Pasadena area. But the generic point is, it's almost like it's a battle scene.
But you know, Mr. President, we saw that in South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, and Florida with hurricanes.
Yeah.
This is also the nature of, to your point, this changing climate.
Welcome to 2025. What's going on, everybody? I was going back and forth about whether to make a video on the LA fires, because obviously it's kind of being covered to death. But after hearing that clip of Biden on the No Agenda podcast yesterday, I was like, dude, okay, if they're going to wheel out the GIMP clone Biden and have him basically say, they're going to have him say it. They're going to have him point out the obvious, or what should be obvious, it was like, okay, I got to play that clip and kind of comment on not just the fires themselves, as kind of mind-boggling as they are. The scope of the destruction is itself pretty, but I think more I wanted to speak to the narratives and the context in which this whole event is unfolding, in terms of the timing, in terms of the Hegelian dialectic that it falls into, as most of these types of questionable events usually do. It's kind of one of those things where I think if you're familiar with the anomalies that were prevalent in events like Lahaina and many other fires in California, I mean, we just had a bunch of fires going on in Chile and Portugal a few months ago with a lot of these same hallmarks of, very kind of pinpoint destruction. You know, a lot of you know exactly what I'm talking about, and then it's hard to say like how many people are really able to ask those kinds of questions. I thought it was amazing that the reporter lady was like, I was asking my cameraman, how hot does it have to get for the safe to actually melt in a bank? And indeed, when you just look at the footage, you don't have to look very long. If you know what you're looking for, and you can just ask simple, basic questions, like houses that are burning to the ground, just reduced to ash, like there's nothing left but a chimney and whatever. And then there's a tree sitting there right next to the house. You see the aerial shots of the whole valley, and the only thing left standing is the trees. I mean, it's kind of a weird forest fire where the only thing left standing is the trees. But of course, that is unthinkable. It's one thing to talk about Maui and, what would the motives be in a community like that, where I think it was like 2,000 structures in Maui, and now we're already up to like 12,000, or probably way more than that. The scale is kind of hard to even fathom, but of course the Santa Ana winds have been around forever, and yes, to me, the interesting thing is where, like, in that clip with Kamala Harris, it's climate change, so you have the official mainstream media narrative of, this is climate change, and it just shows how serious we have to take it and all that. But I think what is noteworthy is that it's kind of been set up to be like the comeuppance of California, which is basically this edifice of wokeness and people calling it the DEI fire and all this stuff. To me, that is the narrative that I think is the intended narrative. For people who are like living in, especially in California, the fact that it was in LA this time, I mean, this is not anything new, where you've had these anomalous fires and buildings that are burned to ash. And when you just think about like how much heat it would take to, like, how do you even light a car on fire? If you could just dump embers onto a car, like how hard would it be to actually light a car on fire if you were even trying to, versus a tree that was supposedly totally drought-ridden and dried up. Like a lot of them still even have the leaves on them, but it's like, okay, maybe the leaves burn off, but all the tiny little, that's kindling. All these tiny little branches on the trees don't burn, but like the tires melt and the aluminum melts down. I mean, there's so much footage now. I mean, I feel like that's kind of probably a big reason why they have, they say they're bringing in the National Guard to prevent looting and, all that stuff. But I think part of it is at least they don't want people going through and asking too many pesky questions. I don't know what's going to happen in terms of their long-term plans for why. I mean, you got Gavin Newsom already talking about rebuilding and, LA 2.0 and all these kind of 15-minute city narratives and all of that. But Gavin Newsom himself, I feel like, is kind of being propped up as the supervillain. And that's the thing. I'm not saying that all the DEI nonsense and the mismanagement isn't real. I mean, I live in Oregon. I know how real this stuff is. But I think all those things with like the fire management, I mean, let's be honest. If you're talking about how you manage the forests and the brush cleanup out in the wilderness areas, that isn't going to have any bearing on how a fire can supposedly leap from house to house but not burn the trees but yet burn the cars. That has nothing to do with even the reservoirs and all the stuff with like the fire departments and all the stuff. Those are legitimate issues and mismanagement, and it's the perfect setup, really. And again, going back into the context of, here the Trump administration is about to come in. It's all about the turning of the tide in terms of like the national consciousness and going back to like, all these celebrities, all these woke Hollywood people who were cheerleading for the left. And now they're having like, this is out of control. This is too much. Creating that whole narrative where now they're all calling for Newsom's resignation. And So my overall perspective is that California has been in basically the whole West Coast has been suffering under all these quote-unquote progressive policies and leadership for years and years. And it's gotten so out of hand to where now, like, what are the implications of this, not just in terms of like the hundreds of thousands of people living there and being affected and losing everything, but on a grander scale, on an economic scale, what the ripple effects will be economically in terms of home insurance and banking. And is this designed to help kind of perpetuate the collapse of the financial system so that when Trump is in with Elon and Thiel and the PayPal model, to transfer over to the digital financial reset involving Bitcoin and crypto or whatever it is, whatever the final... It's basically the Great Reset being rebranded after it didn't really take shape. After COVID and the 4 years of Biden, and with, everyone kind of getting hip to the WEF and Bill Gates. And so the Great Reset branding didn't fly, but now it's basically the make the reset great again. It's just a different sales pitch for the same solutions in the end. And so that ties into like all the crime, which of course places like all the leftist cities, have been suffering under, where defund the police and all that, making it almost impossible to live in a lot of these places. And I really do think that's the point. And, it goes back to the Yuri Bezimov kind of breakdown.
Unlike in present United States, there will be no place for dissent in future Marxist-Leninist America. Here you can get popular like Daniel Ellsberg and filthy rich like Jane Fonda for being dissident, for criticizing your Pentagon. In future, these people will be simply squashed like cockroaches. Nobody is going to pay them nothing for their beautiful, noble ideas of equality. This they don't understand, and it will be greatest shock for them, of course, to explain them the real danger of socialist, communist, whatever, welfare state, big brother government. If people will fail to grasp the impending danger of that development, nothing ever can help United States. You may kiss goodbye to your freedom, including freedoms to homosexuals, to prison inmate. All this freedom will vanish, evaporate in 5 seconds, including your precious lives.
And in his case, it was in the Soviet Union propaganda. But this is the core of the Hegelian kind of pendulum swinging back and forth that the globalists use. And yes, I do believe Trump is every bit a part of that agenda. He's just designed to play a very special role for the conservative base, for the libertarians who otherwise would be very skeptical of bringing in this new technocratic system. That's basically the whole purpose of him and this administration, as far as I can see. And, even going back to 2016, him talking about a biometric digital system.
Number 8, we will finally complete the biometric entry-exit visa tracking system, which we need desperately. For years, Congress has required biometric entry-exit visa tracking systems, but it has never been completed. The politicians are all talk, no action, never happens, never happens. Hillary Clinton, all talk. Unfortunately, when there is action, it's always the wrong decision. Do you ever notice? In my administration, we will ensure that this system is in place. And I will tell you, it will be on land, it will be on sea, it will be in air. We will have a proper tracking system.
So all that being said, I'm not trying to minimize the loss and the suffering of people who've endured this. But, I think it's a little too easy for a lot of people to just jump onto the bandwagon of like, oh yeah, the godless Hollywood. To me, this is all by design. They got what's coming to them through the mismanagement and through their blasphemous Hollywood ways, all of which is incredibly real and dark. But I think it's quite a bit deeper than that. And I think you really just have to look at the evidence of pretty much all the footage I've looked at has anomalous aspects to it in terms of like, why the fire just literally seems to just like start inside of buildings at times. And I do believe that's pretty much what's happening. But when you have the winds, and then when you have fire tornadoes and all that, you have the chaos to kind of mask it all, and it's overwhelming. You know, even if the reservoirs were full, yeah, like there's only so many fire trucks to even be putting water on houses at a time. So even if they had, it would still overwhelm the fire department, no matter who was in charge, no matter how much water. If you ignite that many homes at the same time, yeah, you've created perfect chaos and a perfect, perfect storm, so to speak. But all this coming on the heels of all the drone weirdness, where the government's pretending like they don't know what it is, but they know it's not a threat. Or there's been a lot of psychological operations going on just in the past, month or two, and I didn't even want to kind of get into that. The drone stuff, should be kind of obvious, but this is kind of the devastation is real. It's hard to imagine like how evil you would have to be to destroy the lives of that many people just for the sake of a narrative, or the sake of ushering in a new paradigm, political or economic or spiritual ultimately. And that's the thing that I think is most important, is to allow crazy things like this to remind us of how fleeting life is, and how material wealth, comes and goes. And the Lord said, do not store up for yourself treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy and thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourself treasures in heaven. And those treasures ultimately being the souls of those who are saved through faith in Christ. And by sharing Christ with people and bringing them into the truth, bringing them into the kingdom, that's treasure in the real bank that can't burn down. So I just kind of wanted to remind myself of that, and those of you watching and listening, that like getting caught up, just like when Trump, won his landslide victory, and it was like, look at all the Dems losing their minds, and this fits so much into the broader arc of what we have seen from 2020, J6 to now, the inverse, and Zuckerberg, and everyone's going to kiss the ring, and he's like, this is all by design. And I can't stress that enough. And it's all spiritual in the end. All the different forms of warfare, whether they're military or economic or above board, below board, asymmetric warfare, but mostly in the hearts and minds of people controlling the narrative. You can create a powerful narrative by creating this much of a catastrophe. Or even if you don't buy that, just the fact that God is ultimately allowing this to happen, whether it was purely by neglect and mismanagement, or more than that, the devastation is real, but at the same time, it's all going to burn anyways, ultimately. Even if you don't believe in God, and you just believe in a random, evolving Big Bang universe where the sun is a nuclear reactor in the sky, we're all taught that eventually going to turn into a red dwarf and burn out, and all the the life in the solar system will die. I don't know. It's just fascinating to look at all this footage of this crazy kind of hell on earth apocalyptic scenario that lasts for a few hours, and then compare that to the idea that the sun is like 1 billion times hotter and more intense, and it's just this giant nuclear bomb that's exploding all the time in the sky. And you're an idiot if you don't believe in that. You're an idiot even if you're a Christian, you gotta believe in the big nuclear bomb in the sky, because that's what science teaches. And yet, like, the most insane destruction on Earth, the most insane hellfire, hellscape, infernos that we could ever see are nothing compared to what's supposedly going on. What God has created, 93 million miles away. But I think all of that is idiotic. And scenes like this do kind of put it into perspective of, like, what is it that you really believe just about the world and the reality in which you live, where it's just controlled chaos? I mean, if you believe in evolution, it all came out of chaos. It's all descending into chaos. All order is illusionary anyways. It's all random. There's no intention, there's no design, there's no reason why anything should have any intrinsic lasting value or meaning anyways. It's just combinations of atoms and energy and chemical reactions, and I completely reject that. I reject your Big Bang chaos narrative. and hopefully you can kind of see through the politicized narrative as well. It's a different kind of false flag in this case. With Lahaina, it was the same thing where the authorities did all these questionable things in terms of the rescue efforts and letting people escape. And I mean, you could see it, all the procedures they did. So it has a lot of the same hallmarks, but just on a grander scale. You know, you're talking about a city of millions of people, and this doesn't seem to be over yet. So we'll see what happens, and yeah, let me know what you think, and God bless.
What does it mean to us? Well, if we can measure it, describe it mathematically, understand its laws, then perhaps someday we might be able to duplicate this newly discovered energy source, as we did with the nuclear reaction astronomers found on the sun, and perhaps even tax it. Who will we meet as we travel in and out of the byways and boulevards of space billions and trillions of miles in length and breadth? Is there a chance that we will find planets where there are beings like us or unlike us, but perhaps alike in their deep curiosity about where they are, where they came from, and who shares the universe with them? Many of us think so, because even in our own galaxy, with its billions of stars, there should be millions of planets on which life could have evolved. For we are like the child in the crib, its eyes open, resolving its first mystery. Oh, there it is, the great adventure of the universe, which it took man more than 6,000 years simply to define. And at last we are ready to go there, ready for the next great leap in learning that the human race makes to meet the challenges of the moment.
The heartbreaking videos and images from the ongoing fires in Los Angeles are filling up social media. A number of them are claiming to show the iconic Hollywood sign on fire last night. Some of them show fires surrounding the sign, while others show the sign engulfed in flames. And while the sign was close to last night's fire in the Hollywood Hills, we are happy to report these pictures are all fakes. A spokesperson for the Hollywood Sign Trust told the online magazine The Dispatch the sign did not burn and wasn't even in the line of danger. The Hollywood Hills fire was knocked down overnight and the evacuations have been lifted.
Over the course of the next several years, Los Angeles will be host to the World Cup and then the Super Bowl and then the Olympics. With this rebuilding effort needing to take place, is LA going to be ready for all those global events?
My humble position, and it's not just being naively optimistic, that only reinforces the imperative moving quickly, doing it in the spirit of collaboration and cooperation. The President of the United States, Donald Trump, to his credit, was helpful in getting the Olympics to the United States of America, to get it down here in LA. We thank him for that. This is an opportunity for him to shine, for this country to shine, for California and this community to shine. The opportunity with all of that and all that opportunity and that pride and spirit that comes from not just hosting those three iconic games and venues, but also the opportunity, I think, to rebuild at the same time. And that's why we're already organizing a Marshall Plan. We already have a team of looking and reimagining LA 2.0, and we're making sure everyone's included, not just folks on the coast, people here that were ravaged by this disaster.
You just said you're organizing a Marshall Plan for the rebuilding of California. What is that Marshall Plan? Tell us about this Marshall Plan.
We're just starting to lay out. I mean, we're still fighting these fires, so we're already talking to city leaders, we're already talking to civic leaders, we're already talking to business leaders and nonprofits, we're talking to labor leaders. We're starting to organize how we can put together a collection of individuals on philanthropy for recovery, how we can organize the region, how we can make sure that we are seeking federal assistance for the Olympics more broadly, but also federal assistance for the recovery efforts, and how we can galvanize the community with folks that love this community to really develop a mindset so that at scale we're dealing with the scope of this tragedy and responding to it at scale with efficiency like the executive order I talked about, time value of delivering projects, addressing building codes, addressing permitting issues, and moving forward to rebuilding and being more resilient.
understand what's going on around you. You are not living at the time of peace. You are in a state of war, and you have precious little time to save yourself. You don't have much time, especially if you are talking about young generation. There's not much time left for convulsions to the beautiful disco music. Very soon it will go, just overnight. If we are talking about capitalists or wealthy businessmen, I think they are selling the rope on which they will hang very soon. If they don't stop, if they cannot curb their unsettled desire for profit, and if they keep on trading with the monster of the Soviet communism, they are going to hang very soon. And they will pray to be killed, but unfortunately they will be sent to Alaska probably to manage industry of slaves. It's simplistic. I know it sounds unpleasant. I know Americans don't like to listen to things which are unpleasant. But I have defected not to tell you the stories about such idiocies as microfilm, James Bond type espionage. This is garbage. You don't need any espionage anymore. I have come to talk about survival. It's a question of survival of this system.